So, welcome to our podcast, What Makes a Difference? And we're talking about is online grooming, child exploitation online, and that kind of stuff. And we're delighted to have Lawrence from
Mary Collins Foundation.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you, Lawrence. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an issue that I don't think people genuinely realise how common it is. And I'd be staggered if your listeners weren't aware of somebody that, or know somebody that this has sadly happened to. What we're basically talking about is really how a child is coerced or manipulated, either into sending images, meeting individuals, or discussing sexual aspects in regards to that. So it's quite prevalent today that we're having this discussion on the back of a UK report by the National Police Chiefs Council, where they found that a significant proportion of young people are either being groomed or be grooming other children in regards to sexual information or images around that.
Mm-hmm.
I think also probably from the conversations that we've had with you, Lawrence, I think what's really important, I suppose, for us to stress is that the information and the knowledge that you'll share with us today applies to us all. It's not limited to a generation, and these things can happen to any of us regardless of age. And age is not a barrier, nor is it a guarantee of online safety or immunity to these experiences.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you think the foundation itself is named after Mary Collins, who herself was sexually abused back in the 1960s, and that image was that abuse was recorded through cameras and then been subsequently kept by the offender, and we don't know where those images. Mary herself will say, I don't know where those images are. When we look at adults within relationships, sometimes it's an offence in the UK. I know some other countries it is also a criminal act, is what's called revenge pornography, where an intimate image has occurred, and then either through a breakup or as a form of getting back against the other partner, these intimate images are then shared either on the open platforms or within the individual's network. So yeah, at any age, and sadly, and to any family, social economic background is no protection at all from this crime.
Yeah, because this really all started, wasn't it? Was it back the 1870s?
Yeah, I mean that's. I think everybody thinks of image-based sexual abuse as a new thing, and yes, no, it was absolutely right. An incident occurred with a Victorian, and what we found was he was a photographer. And what he'd done was that the Metropolitan Police raided the property and found there was just under 130,000 indecent images. Not all were children, but were still indecent, and there were children amongst them. So this started way back when cameras were invented, really. And obviously, as technology has progressed and cameras have been around, then those images, because of the nature of them, and back in the later part of last century, was you'd have to go and get the films developed, if you'd done it yourself, it would require a lot more technical information. So therefore, it wasn't so common. Where, I mean, if you think now, you can record either photos or video recordings incredibly easy. Most people have got that ability in our pocket, and we can send that everywhere. So because of the ease, what we've seen is that it's increased and expanded. But yeah, this is absolutely right, Rich. This is not a new issue.
Well, going back to Victorian times, that required specialist knowledge, wouldn't it? So you'd have had very limited scope of people who would have accessed that, been able to access or develop those films that time anyway.
Yeah, and if you think as well, the legislation would have been very different. So one, you'd have had people not reporting it, so in some cases not actually being a legislation or viewed as a problem. I think, when we're talking about how things have progressed, it wasn't until William Thomas Stead in 1885 looked at a piece of legislation that was going through Parliament, and it was the Criminal Justice Act of 1885. And within that, they were looking at the Brothel Laws. And he identified that actually there was a concern with people that were sexually abusing children under the guise that was part of the sex industry. And he set out to prove that actually that's not the case. I wouldn't say he done it the best way. He worked for the Pall Mall Gazette, and with a couple of people. One was a midwife, one was another sex worker prostitute back in the day. They went to the house of Eliza Armstrong. They spoke to Eliza's mum, and they said, actually, can your 13-year-old daughter come and work for us? Victorian London, it wasn't unusual for children to be in employment. The family said yes, that's fine. Eliza left the house believing she was going to work, and what she didn't realise was that actually she was checked by the midwife to make sure she was still a virgin. She was drugged, and then through the Red Cross, she was trafficked out to, I think it was Paris, where she was put into a brothel. And although William Thomas Stead never said that she was ever abused, and he only wanted to see the process so he could write about it, however, that would still have been a traumatic, and she stayed in Paris for a long time. Once he'd seen this happens, and there was a market in brackets for it, what he did was he then wrote about it, and it was under the title of Maiden Tribute to a Modern Babylon, and it was in the Pall Mall Gazette, and it was a sensation. Victorian London was a buzz with this publication. They were horrified that this was happening to children. And one of the things William Thomas Stead identified was we need a criminal age of sexual consent, and he proposed the age of 16, and he put it in there. And politicians were reading this, there was a public outcry, and everyone agreed that there should be, and that seemed a good age. And that became law. So in the UK, our age of sexual consent came from some journalist in 1885. Now, at the time, that was only applied to females, and at the time, that didn't apply to people who are married. So that, as the years progressed, that has slowly changed. And it's quite sad to think that only recently we've now seen that equality in the age of sexual consent. So same-sex relationships and gay sexual relationships are no longer a different age group or illegal. But that has taken a good part of 100 years for us to get there. So we do develop. In that case, although there was some good outcomes for it, history doesn't tell us what happened to Eliza once she was eventually returned back to her parents. But I don't know if you've ever seen My Fair Lady or aware of the work of Pygmalion. Eliza is reported to be named after, Eliza Doolittle has reportedly been named after Eliza Armstrong. The family did recognise that was their daughter, and they went to the police, and William Thomas Stead did receive a custodial, as well as the midwife. And it's interesting that the midwife got longer in prison than William Stead did. But he was last seen on the decks of the Titanic when he was released off to make a new life for himself. So our concept of and our understanding of sexual trafficking, sexual abuse of children, the recordings and sexual consent really goes back to Victorian times. And it's only, the 20th century that different laws have really started to look at that. And that's quite often an international picture as well in respect to that. That was it really on say the history of where we got to and where we got to now.
Mm-hmm. So even back then, when people were having indecent images taken of them, and there was then brought in that legislation, there absolutely would have been less awareness of that kind of thing then. But I think that also references today with people being exploited, people being groomed, indecent images taken of, and people either being not knowing about the legislation or understanding that where they stand within that, as well as that not wanting to report it because of fear of sexploitation.
Mm.
It's one of the most difficult areas for us is dealing with the biases around this and the whole side of things. The legislation in 1978 in the UK, the Protection of Children Act, that was the first piece of real legislation that specified that taking and distributing an indecent image of a child under the age of 18 was an offence. So it really fixed it at that point. But the issue is that didn't and rightly so, didn't realise that how common taking pictures would be, and how easy videos. No one was looking at the internet back in 1978, although it was just about. It was only known to a very few number of people. So we have say the legislation that's often still used, which is quite old and not relevant to this issue. Back in those times, it was very much seen as, because of the efforts you had to go through, but actually wasn't seen as a major issue because of the nature, as you rightly said, Rich, because of that. And then what we find is, as it's become more common, and that we're now dealing with this. I mean, just to give you an idea, in America, one of the main centres for assessing child sexual abuse material, which is what indecent images are called. In 2022, they had 32 million reports that they were reviewing. So, when we're looking at this as a growing problem, the NSPCC themselves identified this as an 87% increase since 2019. This is not a problem that's going away, or an issue that's going away, and it's about actually the individual having the confidence to be able to come forward and speak about that, but for the bodies they're going to really understand that actually people have carried this for many years, and actually are very fearful about giving this information and how that will be dealt with. It really is one of those that I think that, when you speak to survivors who have gone through, victims and survivors who have been sexually abused, either through technology or directly in contact, the fear and the shame and the guilt just carries, and it's such a shame because it's not their guilt or their shame to have. It's the offender, it's the person who's done it to them. Certainly never the victim and survivors. But these are very real emotions, and and I fully understand why a person feels like that. And for a number of people, they will feel either unable to or not ready to tell anyone for many, many years. And for some people, it's for the whole life, and they will never tell anyone. So, where we're seeing the increase, the aspect is helping support people, because it might not be that the person wants to go down the police road. It may be the offender is no longer alive. So there may be reasons for that. But actually, the person may still be struggling with the trauma or dealing with the aftermath of the abuse, and actually, how they can seek support, and whatever that looks like. Like I say, it doesn't always have to be criminal response. There are other therapeutic services out there.
So can we, I suppose, to clarify, we're not just talking about images that are, I suppose, of you, the individual, but images that may be sent to you both constitute, in certain circumstances, abuse. And I suppose picking up on that I suppose reluctance to talk about it, raise it, or do anything about it, there's that element of the sheer portability of images. The fact that images can be transferred over the internet, they can be transferred phone to phone, they can be transferred through social media, means there's a, I suppose it's that fear of the lack of control of that information as well, isn't there? So I suppose that's two questions there for you, Lauren. Sorry.
That's that's right. Exactly right. Yeah, no, just to clarify that any sexual image or indecent image of a child under the age of 18 is an offence in this country. There's no grey area in regards to that. It's a nice, clear piece of legislation in respect to that. You can't control what people send you. So if someone suddenly was to send you that, I would be one concerned that someone in my network was sending that information, and I would have concerns of what risk they may be to children and that sort of thing. And again, if people do have a sexual interest in children, the Lucy Faithful Foundation have a Stop It Now helpline that someone could go to and say, look, I have this interest. I know it's harmful, but I just need support to deal with that. And they will do that. It's a very confidential service, and they're there to help. And Stop Sex Offending is again another organisation that's through counselling and therapeutic support will get people to find strategies that will hopefully stop them offending in regards to that. But for some children, sorry, go on, Rich.
Does this legislation also go across to people using AI image generators?
Yes, there was some changes in the legislation, and they keeps being adapted. We're quite fortunate in this country that we would have, it would be classed as pseudo sexual images, so we can have that. However, in another country, they may not have that piece of legislation. Equally, the challenge is for law enforcement is if the offender is in a country that we don't have any extradition with, or this is not an offence for, they can create. So they could take your voice and your image off of this podcast or something, put that through a system, and then produce an indecent image or an indecent or an intimate recording, and you would know because you would see the individual's body and you go, well, actually that's not actually my body, that's my voice and my head, but that's the rest of it's not mine. But most other people don't, so they don't, you don't tend to walk around naked. So again, it's information. So you may find yourself in a situation where through either AI generators and that sort of thing, that people may think that's you, but actually it's really not. And again, there is another debate where people say, well, actually, if someone was to go on an AI and just create 100% AI generated sexual image of a child, then that means that a real child's not being harmed or abused. So is that not a better thing? Obviously, from a psychological perspective, no, it's not a better thing, because unfortunately that's not how we work as human beings. And that's why, really, if anybody does have any sexual interest children, all of that, and the thing with child sex dolls and all that, is actually no, that's not the right approach. That individual needs to get that support to stop them having those thoughts or those sexual arousals.
So if we go then to, I suppose, the definition of what would constitute an abusive act in terms of the distribution of that information, because I think sometimes there's that lack of awareness of what that actually means. You only have to look at the press, and you see in recent days, the news coverage about the prevalence of the sharing of very explicit pictures in under 16s, and that's not an age group that's limited to. There's a growing issue with that is now being talked about more often, that there's almost that extension of that. I don't even know if I would call it flirtation. I don't think it sits in there at all, but it's almost like there's almost like a grudging acceptance that this happens, but it shouldn't.
Yeah, it's. I know where you come. I think I understand the challenge. The reality is as we progress and we develop, we have sexual interests, and some of us, when we have to think back of our teenage years, they are further back thoughts than one would care to admit. But that what I'd say is to the listeners is, consider it your own when what was your first consensual sexual relationships in the early stages with your boyfriend, girlfriend, and what did that look like? And where do you go? And back in my day, it was first base, second base, third base, and I don't think anybody really ever knew what these bases were, but we had a vague idea what they were in regards to that. And like I say, because I'm of an age where technology wasn't out there and that sort of thing. So if I was in my early intimate stages back as a teenager, it was more an in-person thing. It was the field out the back behind the youth club, that sort of thing. And when parents go away and that. So as children through their latter teens and early adulthood start to become part of sexual relationships, and relationships are building on that, then there is that element. What's new is that technology has now got involved. So for a child, what's the difference between back in the 1980s at I don't know, the football field around the back of the scout hut or wherever it was, getting intimate with your partner there, to being in the bedroom, your own bedroom with your door closed, and being intimate online with your consenting partner that way. It's not, there's risks to that, because that image can then, those recordings of those things can be shared out. But actually there was risks back in the field, the football field, and those sort of things. So there's an understanding that relationships are moving on, they're evolving, and technology is becoming part of that. Now, I'm not saying that we should say, well, that's fine, that's what happens, and there's no risk. There are risks, because there's an intimate image that's been shared out in respect of that. The challenge comes when we start applying legislation, because an illegal image has been made, albeit not under coercion. Some may be through coercion, and it may be that for some people, it's not until they're either listening to this podcast or a few years later, they've thought back to some of their early sexual experiences and think, actually, do you know what? That wasn't as consensual as I thought. And I'm not talking about regretful sex, because that's slightly different. But if there's been coercion, threats, manipulation, force, that's something very different. And they may think, actually, I didn't want to do that, but I was pressurized to doing it, or I was blackmailed into doing it, or threats were made. So again, when we talk about sharing any images that are being sent, there's different motivators behind that. The problem is we've got parents, and I'll say this myself as a parent, who've grown up in the 80s, 90s, who have not had this, and we've now got teenagers who have now had nothing but technology, and very much see it as part of their sexual development in respect of that.
Because I was wondering then, as you're talking about how consensual it was, is when does that go from consent then to exploitation, to grooming, to becoming coercive, and all the other stuff that comes along with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly complex, the whole element of grooming, but it's a very simplistic basis to it. Just to give people an understanding, I think people think that this is an ongoing thing that happened, and in some cases I've worked with, it has been a long-term relationship. But in some grooming, it can take as little as 19 seconds. I think the average within some gaming site grooming was about 45 minutes when we looked at that. So it doesn't have to be a month or 2-year thing.
Can I just stress that, Lawrence, because personally that floors me every time I hear you say that on average, online grooming can take between 19 seconds and 44 minutes from start to finish, to point of coercion and point of abuse. 19 seconds to 44 minutes.
Yeah, that came out in some research when they looked at social gaming environments. Yeah, no, it was that, and that's what we tend to see with certainly the cases I work with in regards to that. And we have a bias, and that's not a dig at anybody. We all have this, and we've evolved to recognise threat and risk. And actually our threat and risk is often physical. It's usually the level of aggression or physical harm that's been linked with that. And, lots of people will say, well, why don't the individual just switch the device off or do X, Y, and Z? And again, when you understand how an offender works, when you understand the methodology towards online grooming, you can often see why. And actually, I often think, why would someone not want to be part of this conversation? So, I mean, what we tend to think is if you can imagine the forum. So it may be that you can be groomed through a social media conversation. It may be gaming. So if you've got your gaming microphone and your headset on, you're chatting to people. You're already engaged in one game. So you've got already a connection, and again, you can very quickly start talking or steering the conversation. Certainly, an offender that I've worked with back in the past said to me once. So he said, "I'll know within about 3 minutes whether I'm going to be having sex with that child by the end of the night." Now, that's literally a 3-minute, very dangerous individual. I'm glad to say is still in prison. But
Lawrence, sorry, isn't it not rape? Rather than sex, is that not rape?
Oh yeah. No, I was using his. That's how he saw the world. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. No, just for people's clarity, for rape is the
his words, not yours.
Yes. Sorry. No. Absolutely. Yes. But if what we're talking about there, so was that how he saw that he would see someone and think, well, actually, I can have sex. So abuse, rape, within about 3 minutes, which is genuinely concerning in regards to that level of ability to read a situation. But if you think, the example I often give is, I don't know, if you go away on holiday and you travel abroad and you go, I don't know, you go to the bar, the pool, the seaside, whichever does it for you. And the first person you meet is, say, from the UK, if you're in the UK, if you're listening to this from abroad, from the country that you're listening from. And all of a sudden, you'll start striking up a conversation. Oh, that's unbelievable. I can't believe the first person I met in a bar is from, whereabouts are you from? And if they say somewhere fairly local to you, it's unbelievable. You're only an hour down the road. I can't believe. And all of a sudden, you're now engaging in a conversation. You guys are, because you've got some shared relationship with the individual in regards to that. So on social media, we'll often see that there's gaming sites, shared gaming sites. We may put what our hobbies and interests are. So again, we might put on, someone can say, oh, I see you play football, or you support Leeds. I support them, or I support Manchester. You beat us. We now straight away, we've got a communication from that side of things. So you have those type of offenders. You have some offenders that will look at it and they'll play the numbers game. If I send out a message to 500 children saying you look gorgeous, I only have to have 1% that will reply, will say thanks, and now I've got a lead in. And we can oversimplify from that, say, the child's perspective, and we say, don't talk to anybody you don't know online. And then we're falling back into that stranger danger sort of like myth as well, where we're actually saying at that point, well, actually, we do speak to people we don't know. Yes, we should have our guard up. If someone's just suddenly sent me a message that I don't know out of the blue, saying something complimentary, what's that about? But again, if they've got friends or they're chatting to other people or you're playing a game with them online, it's not an odd thing not to reply. So it's usually in those initial stages. And again, it's these, it's very skilled individuals often that we see on that. Now, again, often people will say to the children we worked with or to adult survivors and victims, actually, why did you continue? Why did you reply to that? And again, we start very quickly blaming the victim in regards to that. Why should they not reply and say, thank you very much? Yes, it is a concern and that sort of thing. But it's not
if we never engage with people we don't know, we would never have a circle of friends beyond our immediate family. And that's just a fact of life. That means then that anytime you change job, do you not speak to anybody? These are skills we all have to learn. And it's almost what we're talking about here is risk mitigation and risk management, really, isn't it? Is how do you control that risk so that you remain safe, so that your children, your connections, your friends remain safe, while still being able to have a connection with the outside world.
Yeah, and so that grooming, that it's about manipulation. It's about building that relationship and then manipulating or getting the child to comply to what you want. So once we've got that link, that hook in regards to that, then the offender you'll see will go a number of different ways. So it may be that they'll start exploring about the child's life. So, where do you live? Who do you live with? And that side of things. So they can start to get a bit of an understanding. It may be that the offender would think, well, actually, you're talking to me, so will you send me an image? Do you share? Is often what we see. And that's going straight to the point. And then we may see individuals will share pictures of their genitalia. And it's not done just because they're thinking that's, you know, a lovely picture for everyone to see. I always put the analogy of the needy friend at Christmas that will say, are we sharing gifts or that sort of thing? Here, I brought you a gift. Open it now. And you're thinking, oh, they've given me enough time so I can quickly nip out and buy them. It puts that little bit of coercion that I've shared with you, you need to share with me. I've sent you something, you need to send me. And when we look at offenders and we ask them why they do that, a number will say that's the reason they share the images, because
it's almost like I want to make you feel safe. I recognize that I might be uncomfortable with the fact that you've shared this with me, but I don't want you to feel unsafe. But that in itself is a manipulation, isn't it? It's almost like they're manipulating that sense of guilt, that sense of anxiety about the connection you've just established to get something that they can then use and manipulate and coerce with.
No, definitely, absolutely, yeah. It's like I say, but these are all subtle psychological techniques that are being used.
Well, it's all, sorry, Lawrence, it's all sales, isn't it? It's reciprocation. I've given you something, give me something back.
And that's grooming, you know. And the thing is, we all do it, you know. I think any parent listening to this, you know, is when your child's kicking off that, you think, okay, how am I going to play this? Am I going to be the friendly? Am I going to be nice? Am I going to distract with this? I tell you what, if you do that, I'll give you this. Or you wanted that, let me go and do that. We all do that. It's human nature. If there's a last chocolate bar on the plate and we're all being polite and saying, well, does anybody want the chocolate bar? I'm going to use certain terms that's going to increase the odds that everyone's going to go, no, I'm full, thanks, you have it. I'm not stupid. So it is part of that. But and because it's so effective, because we see it in sales, we see it in relationships, we know it works, and like I say, offenders take that to the next level when we're looking at that. And the bit out of it all that saddens and angers me the most is when the offender then puts a twist, and you'll often see it in the chat logs when I'm analysing them, or when I'm doing the direct work with the victim survivor. And then they make the child believe it was their fault for what had happened. That's when I get really cross with the offender, because I think you've not only have you've manipulated this, you've built a relationship, you've now betrayed that relationship with an intent to harm and abuse the child, and actually you've also tried to put it on the child that it was either what they wanted or that the child was somewhat in agreement with that, and that's usually never the case. It's just a technique, because the offender will not want the child to feel that they can go and tell other people.
So as an adult, you know, shame is a really powerful emotion. You layer that with blame and guilt. And then you've got another level of coercion, another level of control, which prevents that disclosure, because there's that sense of, well, it's my own fault, it's my responsibility. I made somebody do this. I made this happen. And that in itself is incredibly destructive.
And that's as well as the perpetrator wanting to protect themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's absolutely, Rich. Yeah, it's a silencing technique. I think it Tortures the Soul research that looked at the impact of image-based sexual abuse and that side of things. And one of the things it identified was actually the fear the victim has in other people not only seeing the image, but actually thinking that they were complicit in it, and that sort of thing. And again, a perpetrator, you know, these are all techniques that are done by the perpetrator. Can't stress this enough. The victim survivor has done absolutely nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. And if it wasn't for the offender, the victim survivor would be able to interact online, have relationships, whatever, without this harm being done. But you'll often see it, and for that exact reason, Rich, that's the offender doing their best to reduce the child disclosing.
So much as I don't want to give anybody a playbook for how this is done, I actually think sometimes there's power in recognizing what happens, because this is about informing people that says, these are your red flags. These are the warning signs. These are your point where you pull back, where you go, no. I understand that process, and I'm not, and I know where this could potentially lead, and therefore I'm going to withdraw from this interaction because this is a point of safety. So where do people put the boundaries that keep them safe, Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about say the communication with the trusted adult. If the individual is a child, that the internet filters, they have their place. They can help to a point, but no technology covers everything. And we've got my son's got filters on their devices. Well, one of my children's just gone to a different age group now, and they're at the stage where I'm going to take some of the restrictions away as they get older. And he sort of said to me, "Oh, I can't chat to certain people because of these." I said, "Okay, I'll come and do it in a minute," because I'm a rubbish dad. That was probably about an hour later that I eventually went up to change them. And he said, "Oh, it's all right, I've got round it." And of course, in my mind, like, really? And I won't say how. He said, "Oh yeah, I've done this, this, and this." And I said, "Oh, well, okay, brilliant." And there's nothing else I can ever do. That's embedded within the game. And so I said, "Oh, okay. Oh well, I'll change them anyway." In regards to that, so it's one step that is protective. For me, it's particularly for children who are moving into starting that transition into adulthood, and moving on there, because we do have to respect kids' privacy online. The temptation is that every day I do a full download of everywhere they've looked at and everyone they've chatted to, but I don't think, particularly given some of my children's age, they would find that. And equally, how am I going to deal with if I find something? So, and I'm not telling parents how to be parents. What I'm doing is just putting both sides of the argument.
It's a bit like, if you think about it, the social media to a certain extent has replaced the concept of the diary, isn't it?
Yes.
If you read your child's diary, then the question is, should you read their social media? And that's about giving each individual the privacy and the boundaries, but making sure they're informed enough to be safe to operate within that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's if a parent has a concern. So if say behaviour was indicating actually there's something going on here, or the parent's gone past the bedroom, they've heard a comment or heard something, or a friend's come and told them that there's concerns. You think actually by having that conversation with the child, saying, no, this is where I'm at. What we've certainly supported a family where there was a concern, and the parent looked at the child's device, and there was an intimate image that they had consensually shared with their girlfriend, and their girlfriend had consensually shared an image back in regards to that. But actually, the child's shame with the parents seeing this particular video of them was such, it had a devastating impact. And these were really cool parents, they were really, understanding, but it was one that the child really struggled to get over, and had a significant impact on their relationship. So what I tend to say to parents is, if you've got a concern and you think, actually, I'm going to just check your device, is actually, do you put some caveats in there? Do you say, I'm really worried, and therefore I'm going to check your device? Are there any images on there that actually you're not going to want me to see? Because then if the kid says yes, then I'm going to have that conversation. If they then say no, and the parent then decides that they are going to go and do that, then just, that it's not always a good outcome in regards to that.
And because of those potential images being taken, that coercion, that control that may be had over that particular individual, what signs can parents look out for, to go, my child could possibly be at risk?
Yeah, it is difficult. So what I want parents to we're great as parents as blaming ourselves. Everything, is if only I'd done this, if I'd only had done that, if only I'd done that. But again, let's put the blame where that's due. That's with the offender. But what we tend to see, obviously, if your child was using terminology that you wouldn't expect, or raises concerns with your child, sexual terms, that sort of thing. If they say, in brackets, have an unhealthy, so almost fearful of not being able to access the device, or fearful when people are around the device. That not necessarily indicating that they're being abused. There may be other reasons, but that might be that they're fearful that if they don't answer within a certain time frame, or they don't respond, to deal with that. If their children often, if they're trying to disclose, it tends to be very roundabout way of doing it. And working with a couple of families where they've said this, both parents have said, I just knew something was wrong. Their behaviour was off. They weren't the child I knew. But then they both said, but I didn't think it was this. They said, I thought it was bullying at school. I thought it was that. What I tend to say is, if we know something's not okay with our kids, we say, how is it? Is everything all right? Yeah. Is everything all right at school? Yeah. Is there a problem with your friends? No. Do we then go, and is everything all right online? Do we just check out that environment as well? If their behaviour, is just reinforcing that you can speak to me, but also giving the child other options. If this is that the child's been forced to do some really intimate recordings, they may not want to speak to their parents or the carers in regards to this. So it's about saying, look, there is, organisations that you can speak to people about. There's teachers. There's, within the network, the child's network, although that probably be quite small, but giving that child that there's areas, and also speaking to, if you are really worried, you're not putting anybody out. This is the people's jobs. Is, speak to the school, ask for the designated safeguarding lead, or the child's teacher, or their deputy or head, and say, I've got concerns. There's something, not right. My child's behaviour, they've become more withdrawn, they're more angry, and they're more defensive about certain things. There's this and this happening. So I've encouraged them to speak to you, because they might say, do you know what? We're going to have a conversation. Oh, that's great. I'll have a chat and just reinforce. So you're maximising the opportunity for the child to tell you.
When I'm working with individuals who have experienced trauma, and I think, Rich, you're probably the same, a big part of that is giving them the assurance and the comfort that this is a blame-free zone, that this is a guilt-free zone, that actually none of that is in this space. And I think that also applies to that conversation with that child, because sometimes those conversations take a while to happen. Sometimes you have to build that faith and that trust and that commitment that this is blame-free and guilt-free, and that there's no place for this in this conversation, and it's not going to be layered on top when you choose to have it. It's about giving that child the assurance that it is okay to have that conversation, that they can trust you with that. Because the amount of pressure that may well be on them, it's not, as you say, it's not as simple as saying, well, actually, I'm just going to cut all their contact with the internet. I'm going to remove their mobile phone. If anything else, that might actually significantly increase the pressure, the fear and the anxiety for that child.
And it's a big ask, for a family, and it's, the child is not going to usually think, okay, now mum's done this, dad's done that, carer's done this. Now's a really good time to sit down. It doesn't work like that. The information will come when the information comes, and actually, it's the parent's response is often what's really worried the child in regards to that. And if the parent, we often say, yeah, fake it if you need to, the game face, the poker face, whatever it is, just to say, to keep the conversation going. We always say steer clear of the Y word, because that's not a good word. Well, why did you send the image? Is straight away the child, oh, this is not a good conversation, I'm gonna close that. Tell me more about that. Oh, that, show some empathy. In your head, you're doing 1,001 other thoughts, cursing the day that broadband was invented and all that. But just showing that child that, as you said, Ali, this is safe. You can tell me, because that's what we want. We want to encourage the child. And actually, the temptation is to say, right, that's it, to protect you. You're no longer going on the internet. And I can tell you that many cases that I've worked where the parents said, I've blocked them from the internet, and I go, Okay, and I've gone and spoken to the child. I'm chatting to the child. I'm going, so are you still able to go and online? Oh no, mum or dad or carers blocked me on the internet. Okay, but are you still able to? Are you going on a devices or? Oh yeah, well I'll go on my friend's one. I just update my Instagram account, and I go, okay. So actually, what we've done is we've almost created another level of secrecy. And I'm not knocking the child because I do exactly the same. So it's about, but we still need to respond. We still need to put protective factors in. So it might be to say, look, do you know what? Why is we're dealing with this issue? Can I ask that you stay clear of this particular social media site in regards to that? It might be that actually the grooming is to such level and the control that the offender has is at such level that you might actually, as a parent, have to say, to protect you, I need to block everything because of these factors. And hopefully, though, if there is, I say, a game console or that sort of thing, you might say, however, you can still do that, but I need to be in the physically in the room with you. I need to take devices over that. But that should be in the extreme aspect, because we need to show the child we trust them, particularly if they've been tricked. The younger children, we've spoken a lot about teenagers, but for primary school age children, they may not realise that what's happened to them is some sexual abuse. They may just have thought it was a funny game that somebody they were chatting to online was doing, and that sort of thing. So it's about how we show them that support is out there, and actually that they can come to us, because if it happens again or there's other concerns, or the child may have more to say, there may be more to the story than they've initially told. That's quite common. That okay, just keep telling them that drip information that comes through on that. People can always check their history on the system around those sort of things. But it really is, and having those conversations, we quite often hear they're difficult conversations to have. It's quite good if there's a good news report or a good TV story, or, oh, I just saw this on Facebook, that, this happened. I mean, my children all know what I do. I've done this job for too many years. So they're very, very aware of my work and what it looks like and that sort of thing. But, I was chatting to my son about a new trend that's occurring. And I said, oh, we're dealing with this. And I was chatting to him and he looked at me and, yeah, no, that happened to my friend. And I did look at him and said, you do know what I do for a living, don't you? You could have come and spoken to me. And he went, oh, yeah, I could have done. So sometimes it's about, if we don't ask, the child may think, oh, I won't mention it. So it's those pinch points where you think, oh, this is a bit of an opener. I've just heard this. Have you ever come across that? Has that happened to any of your friends? I always ask friends rather than you, because that's more defensive, and find out that way. But
that's also a point, I suppose, that I wanted to raise, is that sometimes there isn't a gender bias in this. This can happen to any gender and in any form of relationship, in any combination of relationship. It doesn't matter. It's not limited to childhood to teenage years to early 20s to 30s. It spans every age generation and every gender.
Absolutely.
And to add to that as well is, you said you're mostly focusing on teens and obviously then on younger children, with not recognising that it's until later. But I think that goes across the whole spectrum. People may not realise they're in abusive relationships until however many years later they go, that was not a normal relationship. That was not a right relationship to be in. They don't recognise that the abuse or the neglect or whatever that goes along with that.
Yeah, often it's that reflection, and particularly if people have moved up, and again, if people listening to this think, actually, I have been in an abusive relationship, they can. We're fortunate in this country, we don't have a limitation on any of these offences, so you can go and speak to the police, and we've focused very much on the harm and negative, but just to say, I work with police forces and local authorities and social workers and schools throughout the country, and well, internationally as well, but if we focus on the UK, and there have been significant advances, significant understanding on how to support victims and survivors, how to respond to this incident. There are independent services, and that there is a significant amount of energy put in by authorities to identify children who are being harmed, and also to pursue people who are online or on the internet with an intention of sexually harming children. This isn't that people aren't doing it. I mean, obviously limited on some of the techniques they use, but if anybody is out there and they're just worried about actually how will that be dealt with. I'm not saying every service you're going to have a gold standard response. I wish I could, but what I say is that you should do, and if you don't, certainly you can complain in regards to that, and it would probably be the minority of cases because of our understanding now.
Yes.
If you become aware that there are intimate pictures that are of you in the public forum that you have not consciously chosen to place there, how do you have them removed?
If you're a child, you can go on something called Report Remove. So if you Google Report Remove, that's with the Internet Watch Foundation, which is an amazing charity that has the job of scanning the open net, the networks, looking for abusive and indecent images and getting them taken down. A very quick success rate, very good organisation. They joined with Childline. So but the child can look online. Basically, they have to give a copy of the image to the organisation. They'll hash it. So basically, do you ever remember those painting by numbers pictures that you had numbers and new colour? So it basically looks at a picture and just turns it into a set of numbers. So think of a painting by numbers. It's not the actual image they look for. And then they will constantly, that will just go on a file that they will constantly be searching. So whenever an image is sent online and that sort of thing, all the big networks and that sort of thing goes through this filtering system, and they will say, oh, we know that's an abuse picture, and they'll get that removed. So there's the option there. If the individual, if it's an adult, so we're talking about revenge porn and that sort of thing, within the UK we have the Revenge Porn Helpline by Southwest Grid for Learning. Again, another excellent organisation that really understands one, where you stand legally, because that is an offence in the UK, and actually what you can do to have steps to have those removed in regards to that. If you're worried it's happening to you, or that's it maybe not have extended that. So maybe a child has, I don't know, shared an image with another child consensually, and now they're thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Then, they'll ask the other child to delete that. And then if they don't, then depending on the child's age, you can either include, schools or the police, and that can quickly be done because that's not been shared more broader. So there's numerous ways that can occur in regards to that.
Mm-hmm. Lawrence, thank you very much. Have you got any key takeaways for our listeners?
I think, like I say, it's if this has happened to you, and sadly, like I say, this is not an unusual form of abuse to happen. There is support out there. It isn't, whatever you think, it isn't your fault. It's a horrible thing, and actually, when it's ready for you, definitely get support and advice and guidance. And it doesn't always have to be legal support or with the police. That's an option you may have. You may just want to start speaking to someone more therapeutic or from a mental health background, if that's what helps.
Just to clarify, if somebody contacts your organisation, Lawrence, and says, I have concerns here, then they still have the ability to make a choice over whether or not they then maybe make a disclosure to the police. Obviously, if there's actually a child abuse situation, then you're probably legally obligated to disclose that. But there's still choices to be made that you would inform them of.
Oh, absolutely. And what we can say, and quite often when a parent contacts us to say, look, this has happened, is we can explain the process and some of the challenges with the family may experience within the process. And often that's enough for families to go, okay, now I understand. If they've been unfortunate, on those rare occasions to not be getting the support they should be, that sort of thing, that's when we tend to wade in as well, and just sort of say, no, this is not best practice, or this is not following police guidance or social services guidance and that side of things. But yeah, I mean, it's it's that conversation with the child. And I mean, on our website, we do have some resources for parents on talking to your child if you've got concerns. So some techniques that parents may find, and also one for parents as well. If you find out that your child has been exploited or abused through the use of technology, this is not by any means a reflection on you as a parent. This has just been they've been just very unlucky, and it can happen to my child as much as it can happen to any other child. So this isn't about good parenting, bad parenting. It's just sadly an offender targeted your child. So that's what that, and just keep an open mind. If your child's behaviour changes and there's something not right, what I tend to say is go with your parents' gut instinct. Then there is something wrong. Explore what it is and speak to other professionals, because amongst the child's network, you may create the situation for them to either come forward or for you to start putting the pieces together.
Yeah, and I also think it's not about being paranoid. The internet's not going away. It's using it to the best of what it's there for.
Yeah, not everybody online is there to groom and harm your child. And it's very easy when there's news reports day after day, and we look at the stats in regards to this. But it does happen. But equally, a child can equally go and chat to and interact in forums without being abused. But it's like I say, it's just being aware of those.
Thank you. I think what we'll also do is, as we normally do, we'll make sure that the contact details for the Mary Collins Foundation is available in our show notes, and any resources that you can pass on, Lawrence, we'll certainly make sure that they're available, and there's links to those too.
Yeah, you did mention a few organisations as well, so if you could, we'll put them in there as well.
Thank you so much for your conversation too. It's been really worthwhile.
Absolutely, thank you. No, lovely.